Chapter 319 to 321. It was 2 weeks since Team 7 arrived in the Land of Waves, and Anko was getting more and more frustrated as her attempts at locating Gato failed one after another. The rat was hidden well. Much too well for her tastes. If only she was able to reach him and introduce him to her snakes. The rest of this entire mission would be a piece of cake after that. But no! At first, Anko tried the old-fashioned way and sent shadow clones as scouts all around, listening to rumors and trying to find Gato's hideout with their tracking and sensing prowess. That didn't do much. She didn't have a proper lead for tracking to work, and Anko quickly understood that her meager sensing capabilities were rendered useless by the fact Land of Waves was a country. It didn't matter she could sense almost anything in several hundred meters when she really focused. In the end, that was not even a drop in the bucket compared to the size of an entire country. Since her first attempts failed, Anko decided to go a bit smarter about it. She decided that tracking Gato was pointless for now, and as such, she focused on his subordinates. Anko tracked several thugs working for Gato. Some she interrogated and killed, others she let be and just followed them to their hideout. Unfortunately, this was yet another miss. Anko did discover several hideouts across the country, but there was no sign of Gato in any of them. No matter how much Anko searched them, she simply found out that these were hideouts for his mercenaries, and the businessman clearly didn't stay in such lowly accommodations. Anko's third attempt was fueled by her frustration. She honestly decided to stop giving a damn and straight-out infiltrated a town where Gato's shipping activities were focused. That was Gato's domain. Everybody important in the town worked for Gato. It was the only port in the Land of Waves that was allowed to trade with the outer world, and Gato's ships were coming and going on a constant basis. Anko quickly found out the main reason why Gato wanted to keep the Land of Waves under his rule was the humid temperature good for growing a particular drug that was all the rage nowadays in the capital cities. Most of these trading ships simply smuggled drugs and occasionally slaves. Not that she cared. It was a horrid sight, but during her career as a kunoichi, Anko saw and did worse. Unfortunately for the slaves, nobody paid her to free them. She was not a hero, and helping these people would not help her in finding Gato. She did briefly ponder about causing a commotion and hoping the businessman would show up, but that would take too much time. It would be a waste of effort considering Anko suspected Gato's men would definitely attempt attacking Tazuna again in a week or so. Gato most likely already sent mission requests, so his reinforcements should be arriving anytime soon. His wealth was also nowhere near the Land of Waves or its slowly bankrupting banks. Even if Anko fully destroyed the town, it wouldn't matter in the grand scheme of things. The only thing capable of making their mission easier was Gato stopping his breathing activities. The next thing Anko did was to check on the supply lines of the town. She broke into various offices and checked what was imported and exported. Sadly, she didn't find what she was looking for and had to grudgingly admit she started to feel a bit of respect towards Gato and his methods of hiding. Wherever he stayed, he probably received supplies from somewhere else than this town. In hindsight, that was quite smart, as it prevented anybody from finding out the location of his hideout by simply following the paper trail. That was Anko's last attempt at locating Gato. She simply lacked the necessary time to find the midget. Fortunately, the 2 Kiri ninjas arrived, and that meant the responsibility of guarding Tazuna could be split among them and Team 7. Zabuza and Kakashi usually were on the babysitting duty, taking the Genins of Team 7 to the bridge and attempted not being bored to death watching the process of bridge building, while Anko enjoyed some of her secret stash of dango at Tazuna's house, lazing around. She meant guarding Tsunami and Inari. Zabuza's apprentice, Haku, was quickly snatched by Anko when she found out the trap could actually make dango. As such, Haku was stuck with house guarding duty with Anko, where she served as the main dango maker for what she thought was a slightly deranged, snake-loving kunoichi, too dangerous to offend. Hence, Haku made damn sure her dango was tasty. Needless to say, this was one of the more bizarre missions for the young trap. It was only natural to split their forces in this way. Raiga was apparently S-rank, so while Anko was also S-rank ability-wise and could theoretically face Raiga in 1 versus 1, Kakashi and Zabuza would be outmatched if they found themselves alone facing Raiga. Putting them together on one team was to simply give them a chance to survive and withstand Raiga's attack until Anko arrived. Inari actually tried to tell them how hopeless facing Gato was, and how utterly outmatched they were by the civilian dwarf. Poor kid miscalculated his candies with that decision, because Zabuza was not one for coddling kids. Nor was the extremely frustrated Anko. The killing intent that washed over Inari the moment after he tried to be a childish prick made the boy cream his pants brown and fall on his butt, bawling his eyes out from the sheer fright. Anko could swear it was mostly Zabuza's fault. She released only enough killing intent to scare a Chunin. Who in their right mind would use their whole killing intent on a small brat? She utterly ignored the fact Zabuza, even when using all of his killing intent, would not be able to scare an experienced Chunin. Poor Inari forgot how to speak for the next day. Good for him that Anko knew some rudimentary mind healing, otherwise he would have had nightmares until he was middle-aged. After that, Tsunami was quite cross with both Anko and Zabuza, and they suddenly found themselves without breakfast privileges. What a bummer. On a less depressing note, Kakashi was also glad for the addition of Zabuza and Haku, once the two tsunderes became comfortable around each other and stopped secretly palming their weapons every second of the day. Nowadays, Zabuza only glared at the giggling Kakashi whenever the perv read his books in front of Haku, who became red as tomato every time. This led to little Sasuke developing a small crush on Haku. Oh, the mighty Uchiha tried to hide it and act indifferently, but Anko saw right through his facade and noticed the subtle glances in Haku's direction with his Sharingan activated, etching the sight into his memory. Anko wasn't about to tell the poor boy that he fell for a trap. She could almost taste the sweet, sweet opportunity for some high-end teasing that would present themselves when the Uchiha finally realizes he etched Haku's image forever into his mind, linking it with the feelings of attraction, and that Haku is actually not as female as Sasuke first thought. Anko wondered if this would cause some problems with the boy's sexual orientation later on. Sharingan was a powerful tool, but it could be utterly devastating to the user if used during emotional moments, since anything seen with it can't be unseen. She almost pitied Sasuke. So far, this first mission was proving to be an incredible success as far as getting new experiences went, and provided a lot of entertainment for Anko. Alas, all good fun has to come to an end, Anko sighed, sipping on her tea as her senses picked up two hostile people approaching Tazuna's house. She stood up and rolled her shoulders. Time to earn my keep, I guess. We will have uninvited guests soon. Anko informed Haku, who briefly stiffened before resuming her dango-making activities, only acknowledging the information with a small hum. Tsunami, who was making lunchboxes for the bridge builders, threw Anko a nervous glance, but the kunoichi didn't deem it important to assuage the woman's worries. She simply created a shadow clone, sending it to guard Inari in his room, while the original Anko leisurely walked to the porch and sat on the stairs there, waiting for the two attackers while chewing on dango. Despite her being a picture of perfect calmness outwardly, Anko was very worried about her team on the bridge. She felt only two hostile signatures with chakra around Genin level approaching Tazuna's home. That either meant the bulk of Gato's forces would focus on the bridge, or that these two were just an obvious distraction and there was somebody else hidden in the shadows. Anko wanted nothing more than to send Haku to the bridge, or even go there herself, while only leaving shadow clones for Tsunami and Inari's protection. For the two approaching thugs, that would have been more than enough. Unfortunately, there was still that second option, and the possibility these two were just a cheap diversion. It was at times like these Anko cursed that she was not a natural sensor. The sensing technique Lady Tsunade taught her was good, and Anko's sensing abilities were great, but that was still far from incredible. Guess I will just have to believe in Kakashi and the brats. She mentally frowned. Her shadow clones scattered around the country didn't report anything unusual, and the clone she sent to tail Tazuna and her team still existed. The clone would pop the second it deemed the brats were in danger, so its continuous existence was reassuring for Anko. It took 10 more minutes until Anko saw 2 thugs exit the forested area near the house, confidently grinning as if they already finished their tasks. Anko instantly recognized them from her time of infiltrating Gato's town. These 2 were not the good sort even among the slavers working there. Karizu and Momoto were quite infamous for their raping tendencies, and while they would not disobey orders, they were also known to be overly brutal fulfilling them. Unless it was stated their target was to be brought back unharmed, these 2 would take great pleasure indulging their sadistic urges. Sage forbid if their target was actually some hapless woman. Gato must have definitely handpicked them for this. The only indication of Anko's displeasure was a slight twitch in her cheek. It was obvious what the midget wanted to happen to Inari and Tsunami. Not for a second did Anko doubt that if she wasn't here to protect them, Inari would have been given a slow and painful death in front of Tsunami, as the 2 would have raped her while forcing her to watch her dying son, probably taunting her with some cheap lines like, "Don't worry, we will give you another son soon," or something similarly disgusting. The life of Kunoichi made Anko desensitized to many things, but that didn't mean she didn't find some of them extremely displeasing. The 2 thugs in front of her. There was no way Anko would give them an easy death. "Hey, you must be one of the ninjas boss mentioned." Momoto's grin widened as he spotted Anko, his eyes caressing her curves. Anko did wear somewhat revealing clothes. It was nothing like what she was used to wearing before meeting Lady Tsunade, but her clothes still clearly showed her curves and a bit of cleavage. It was a perfect distraction, considering the majority of ninjas were males. "Looks like we hit the jackpot," Karizu exclaimed, also ogling Anko, who just lazily watched them from her spot on the porch. "Not only can we play with Tazuna's daughter, but there is also another bitch for free." He snickered. Anko felt a bit disappointed at their reaction. Clearly, these 2 belonged to the majority of civilians that never saw a ninja nor had any idea what it meant to be a ninja. It was a curious thing, considering their profession. They are probably just locals who were thugs and became mercenaries for Gato when the midget showed up. Experienced mercenaries would run the heck away the second they got to know ninjas were involved. Anko thought. Despite the existence of ninjas, there were still some nut jobs who would risk being a bandit or a mercenary. Then again, that might have been due to the fact the prowess of ninjas was not widely known among the masses. Anko's lips widened into a sadistic smirk. "Oh, boys. Yes, you are right. You hit the jackpot and can now play with Anko-ni," she whispered to herself, licking her lips in anticipation as she slowly stood up. Karizu and Momoto heard her words, and while the content slightly aroused them, the looks the woman was giving them unsettled them and killed any boner they could have had. Momoto opened his mouth to say something, but Anko didn't care for idle banter. These 2 were weak and had no information she was interested in. Before either of the 2 thugs even comprehended what was happening, they found themselves enwrapped in a bone-crushing embrace of 2 massive serpents that threateningly hissed into their ears. Only then did they realize their feet were no longer on the ground as they powerlessly dangled through the air, making the 2 thugs struggle for air. With every jerk, however, their prison only tightened. "Gotta love constrictors, nay?" Anko chuckled, slowly approaching the 2 in a purposeful gait, her body language screaming, "Danger," while she twirled a kunai in her hand. Karizu wanted to retort. He really did. But he was barely able to gasp for air. Letting out a sound was impossible in his current situation. Instead of an angry retort, only an empty wheeze left his lips. Momoto, on the other hand, watched Anko with wide, frightened eyes. He was afraid of snakes, even the small ones, so the massive one currently crushing his bones had a profound effect on his bowels. He already realized what was coming, and that this was the end for him. Just for their respective reactions, Anko chose to plunge her kunai in the gap in between the coils of her snake summon, who was giving Kurizu a hug, nailing it handle deep in the unfortunate man's thigh, causing him to scream. Anko didn't like his defiant look. She decided to correct his attitude before asking her questions. "I dislike rapists," Anko cheerfully said, as she jerked the kunai out of Kurizu's body in a fluid, quick, and very painful motion. "That kind of threat always hangs above the head of every kunoichi. Quite a lot of us actually do find ourselves on the receiving side at least once during our careers." The snake coiling around Kurizu shifted, revealing his groin area, only giving him a second to realize what is to come. Anko also decided to slowly approach the man's bits with her kunai, savoring the growing horror in his eyes. "Some of us," Anko abruptly slashed, and enjoyed the man's pain-filled shrieks instead. Learn to accept it as a part of the job. Continuing to inflict pain on Kurizu would be pointless for now. He was almost drowning in it. Anko decided to turn towards Momoto, who was shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Anko gave him a cheerful smile and continued talking. "Others, mostly those who already experienced it once, try to get used to it. You wouldn't believe how many kunoichi like rough play in the bed as a result." Anko's bloody kunai gently dug into Momoto's cheek, creating a small gash almost from the side of his mouth to his ear. "I heard it is much easier to cope with it when you can find at least a minuscule enjoyment in that shitty situation," Anko hissed in Momoto's ear, while her words dripped with venom as her kunai carved into his flesh, hitting all the most painful and tender spots, causing him to scream. 2 minutes later, Anko suddenly stepped back, her kunai just shy of Momoto's eye, as she realized that she might have gone a bit too far. "I got carried away." She wryly smiled in self-mockery and rubbed her forehead. Her face contorted into a grimace. "Damn, that was so much fun. I wonder if I would have ended in torture and interrogation department if Lady Tsunade didn't take an interest in me. I gotta say..." She appraisingly looked towards 2 gasping and whimpering men. "I do have a talent for this." Her story about kunoichi and rape, that was just to rile herself up and unnerve the 2 poor sods. A passionate torturer with a personal vendetta is much more frightening than a stone-faced one who is doing it just because it is his job. In a way, it was a form of mental torture. Not that it didn't happen. It's just that only an enemy ninja had a chance to rape a kunoichi, and most would sooner kill than rape. Anko's opinion on that particular part of kunoichi life was simple. If you are weak enough to get raped, then you clearly deserved it. Anko's view was cold and unsympathizing, as expected from a woman who didn't have all that many friends and was hard to get along with. "Now then, let's continue," Anko excitedly thought, giving the 2 bloodied men a starry-eyed look. She already decided to ask the lazy-ass Hokage to assign her some interrogation missions after this. Training her brats couldn't compare to tending to someone she knew deserved her worst. It filled her with quite a bit of satisfaction, seeing these rapists' faces contort in pain. Unfortunately for Anko, it was then she froze as memory feedback from her clone entered her mind, causing her head to alarmingly whip into the direction of the bridge with worry in her eyes. Kakashi leisurely stood on the side of the bridge, enjoying his book while also making sure his senses of hearing and smell were sharply monitoring the surroundings. This was thankfully shaping up to be one of these boring and slow days where nothing happened, and Kakashi was glad for that. He understood and accepted that as a ninja, strife was inevitable, but every day without a fight was a win in Kakashi's books. Zabuza looked a bit annoyed as he sat on the opposite side of the bridge, focusing on maintaining the mist around it. There was no mist on the bridge, but the area surrounding it was utterly shrouded in white, cloudy substance. It took quite a bit of concentration on Zabuza's side to keep it from spilling onto the bridge, but this was the best defense against any ranged assassins. It would block sight for obvious reasons and chakra sensing, because the mist was full of chakra. Hence, a chakra sensor would see only a big gathering of chakra unless he crossed the mist, which would instantly alert Zabuza. Naruto was helping with the construction of the bridge, alongside his clones hinged as workers, while Hinata was silently cheering him on. At first, she occasionally turned her Byakugan on and off to scout the surroundings, but that brought her quite the headache because of the chakra-infused mist. Now she didn't even bother. Zabuza and Kakashi were very focused, and Hinata doubted anyone could sneak close to the bridge without them noticing, no matter if she occasionally used her Byakugan or not. Zabuza's mist wasn't the only precaution either. Naruto also had a few clones stationed around, hinged as inanimate objects. Somehow they could still see just fine, despite being a rock or a twig. Sasuke was near Kakashi, practicing Uchiha Taijutsu katas while also training with his Sharingan. He was definitely not wasting his time just lazing around like Hinata and Kakashi, and he was not paid for helping with the construction, so there was no way he would do that like the dork Naruto. Kakashi supposed he should have reprimanded Sasuke for not paying attention during the bodyguard mission, but he simply couldn't be bothered. It was around lunch when Kakashi suddenly saw Sasuke's eyes widen, and just like that, the Uchiha disappeared only for Tazuna to appear in his spot. "Wa! Kawarimi!" Kakashi's head whipped toward the place where Tazuna stood just a split second ago. He was just in time to see Sasuke bending back, barely avoiding a massive long golden arrow, having it only tear a bit of flesh from his shoulder rather than skewer the right side of his chest. Sasuke was for the first time in his life glad he was still a kid. Only his small stature compared to Tazuna allowed him to dodge the sneak attack. Gasping for breath, Sasuke's head tilted to the right, and his sight instantly fell upon the huge golden arrow struck in the bridge, just an inch from his cheek. Sasuke gulped as he realized his quest for revenge against Itachi and restoration of the Uchiha clan almost came to an end if the arrow was aimed a bit to the side. "Naruto, evacuate the workers!" Kakashi shouted, and Naruto instantly got to his assigned task. Fortunately, the bridge workers kept their calm and let themselves be led away, surrounded by Naruto's clones for protection. The two Jonins quickly understood their peaceful day was over, and somebody was attacking. Zabuza's mist seemed ineffective, and that could only mean the enemy had some way to bypass it. As such, Zabuza instantly dissipated the mist, cursing a second later when he realized the attacker stayed a foot away from the mist on the opposite side, not entering it, and therefore not alerting Zabuza of his presence. But how could he locate Tazuna through the mist? It can't be hearing or smell. The distance is too great for that, and my mist would interfere. Zabuza disgruntledly mused. Something felt amiss to him. It was then that a big, gray, ethereal, worm-like creature phased through the floor of the bridge, rushing towards the frightened Tazuna, who was retreating with the other workers. Only quick interference of Naruto's clones that grabbed the men, lunged them onto their shoulders, and jumped out of the way saved them from the creature reaching them. The creatures didn't stop, though, and a game of cat and mouse started, creating mayhem and panic among the civilian workers. It just became that much harder to do their job for the ninjas. Hinata's mind instantly comprehended that there must be an enemy who somehow managed to sneak under the bridge. She activated her Byakugan and rushed towards the side of the bridge. Flooding the kunai with her lightning chakra, she made it sharp enough that when she threw it into the ground, it sank handle deep into the stone. Hinata somersaulted over the railing while holding a thin wire fastened on the handle of the kunai. Only channeling chakra into her hands protected them from being cut as she flew through the air, using the length of the wire to propel herself under the bridge. There was a red-haired woman, using tree-walking exercise to stick upside down on the ceiling of the underside of the bridge while 3 humanoid monsters encircled her, one of which was the source of the gray worm. Thanks to her Byakugan, Hinata still saw the mayhem the worm was causing on the bridge and understood dispatching the creature was extremely important. Needless to say, Hinata sprang forward, running on the ceiling, intending to engage the redhead woman and her apparitions. Kakashi and Zabuza wanted to go and confront the archer. Leaving him be was not an option with how accurate he was despite the mist. Now that the mist was gone, letting him shoot more would be suicidal. It was a lifesaver that Naruto's clones, hinged as inanimate objects, were somehow managing to distract him so far, preventing him from interfering. But their intention to go and deal with the archer was stopped when Raiga appeared on the edge of the bridge, his arms crossed under his chest and dissatisfied scowl marring his face. Kakashi was glad the man didn't sneak attack during the chaos. That would definitely result in losing a member of the team. Unfortunately, the 2 Jonins now had to deal with Raiga. The choice between a dangerous archer and S-rank lightning-using swordsman was a no-brainer. If they went for the archer, Raiga would slaughter everybody on the bridge. Worse yet, they had no chance of facing Raiga unless they ganged upon him. Grimacing under his mask, Kakashi shouted toward Sasuke, "Sasuke! Go and deal with the archer! He can't be allowed to shoot!" He didn't like giving Sasuke this task. He wasn't really convinced Sasuke could pull it off, but letting the archer do whatever he wanted would definitely decide the battle. The original Naruto was hiding among the retreating workers, leading them away from the bridge. They were almost at the entrance leading towards the Land of Waves when Naruto's chakra senses started tingling. Naruto realized he didn't have enough time to completely negate the attack. His hands instantly blurred into a cross-shaped hand seal. "Multi-shadow clone technique!" he shouted, creating hundreds of cannon fodder between the ground and the workers who were being lifted into the air by the growing pile of orange-clad bodies under them. Every clone of Naruto used their chakra sensing to shift the workers to a position that would hopefully save them from death. But they had only a split of a second before massive crystal-like light purple spikes grew from the ground, skewering everything in their path and popping a huge amount of shadow clones out of existence. No bridge worker died from the attack, and Naruto knew it was due to sheer dumb luck and the fact the target was Tazuna. Another batch of clones grabbed the workers one by one, none too gently, not paying attention if they had broken bones, cut off limbs, or whatever injuries. Then the clones rushed with their respective workers towards the village, each of them in a different direction to make it harder for the attacker to give chase. Naruto knew the actual target was Tazuna and didn't think the attacker would go and chase after ordinary workers, but it was better to take a precaution than later regret not doing anything. As for Tazuna, Naruto couldn't lead him to the town. That would endanger the civilians living there. He just saw his hidden opponent attempt to kill tens of men in order to get to Tazuna. As such, Naruto decided to make his stand near the entrance of the bridge just as he finally located his hidden enemy with his chakra sensing. One of the clones who was about to pass through the entrance of the bridge, carrying a middle-aged man, suddenly glowed orange, causing the man to widen his eyes before a sudden explosion deafened the world. From the dust that rose due to the explosion, a shadow jumped out, revealing a blue-haired woman in green kimono as she slid on the ground, a thin, crystal-like armor covering her body with multiple cracks scattered all around it due to the explosion. The woman was, however, unharmed, making Naruto inwardly curse. The explosion was supposed to hurt even Jonin, and he just realized these crystals would be extremely hard to deal with. "To think none of our 3 plans worked," the woman grumbled, watching Naruto's clones in front of her like a hawk. "You are quite good." Naruto could only wryly smile at the praise. After all, it was just pure luck that saved the day in this particular situation.